welcome you all to the 205 session, which is a model for responding to houselessness in the Black trans community during the global pandemic without the use of state apparatuses. And this will be led by Ash Williams. Ash uses pronouns he and they and is a Black non-binary trans femme from Fayetteville, North Carolina. Since 2012, Ash's work has included theorizing dance and performance art as tools for understanding bodies and corporeality within the movement for Black lives, leading rapid response and guerrilla actions, particularly as an architect of Charlotte Uprising, which followed the murder of Keith Lamont Scott, and abolitionist organizing at the intersections of gender justice, racial justice, reproductive justice, and anti-carcerality to build alternatives to police and policing. This work has included spearheading a successful statewide campaign, #EndShacklingNC, to end the practice of shackling pregnant incarcerated people in North Carolina, as well as a successful campaign, #TransferKannataka to transfer Kannataka Zara Brown, a Black trans woman, from a correctional facility designated for men to a women's facility. Ash has a lot of really amazing achievements. He holds a master's degree in ethics and applied philosophy, a bachelor's in philosophy, and a minor in dance from UNC Charlotte. They're currently adjunct professor in women's and gender studies department at UNC Charlotte and a former member of the Greenpeace USA Action Team. For the last 2 years, Ash has been vigorously fighting to expand abortion access by funding abortions and training other people to become abortion doulas. And now I'm going to throw it over to you, Ash. Thank you so much for being here and being part of this.
Thank you, Scott. I am going to share my screen now. Y'all can see it, right? Yes. Okay. Thank you, Scott, for that introduction. Also, shout out to my therapist. They're a provider in North Carolina. And also shout out to the other House of Kannataka folks who may be on the call with us today. There was at least one other person who was presenting. I'm gonna go ahead and start. So before I start, I actually want to read this land acknowledgement. It is from a workshop that I have participated in for the last 5 years called the Decolonial Feminist Politics Workshop out of the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. We read a feminist scholar once a week or for a week, once a year. And we come together from all over the world to do that work. But this practice of the land, acknowledging the land, started from my participation in that workshop. And so I just want to name that I adapted this land acknowledgement from that workshop. It reads, as many of us are settlers, or maybe y'all, as many of y'all are settlers, immigrants, or descendants of those forcefully brought to this land like me, it is our collective responsibility to pay respect and recognize that the land that we live on is the traditional territory of Native or an Aboriginal community, and we are all here because this land was occupied. So even as we're in this virtual space together, I want us to also think about, occupying space still. In recognizing that this space, like this virtual space, right, occupies colonized Aboriginal territories. And out of the respect for the rights of Aboriginal people, it is our collective responsibility to critically interrogate the colonial histories and present day implications of this, and to honor, protect, and sustain this land. And so one of the ways that I believe we are trying to honor, protect, and sustain the land is by being engaged in the work that we're all engaged in. And also, I'm not really sure how we can talk about violence in any of its forms without acknowledging colonization as a first kind of onset of violence. And we are all impacted by that. I want to pause here and point out, where do I get out of my, how do I, to escape, okay. I'm trying to share a different web page with y'all that's not this one. I wanna make sure that everyone knows how to access where to find what native land you're on. And so if you type in native land map into Google, a link will pop up. It's usually like the first one, and you can type in the place that you live and find what native land you're on. I also wanted to start by talking about the House of Kanataka and lifting up the work that we do. So we are a collective of LGBTQ organizers from across the state of North Carolina, and we came together around the winter of 2019 in support of the transfer of Kanataka Zayre Brown from a men's facility to a women's facility. So a lot of us heard about Kanataka Zayre Brown because of a newspaper article, and we used social media to reach out to the people that are close to her, to ask her if there were things that trans and queer folks in North Carolina who are organizers or advocates, what we could do to support her. And so we came together to support Kanataka's transfer 2 years ago. So since then, our work still looks like continuing to support Kanataka. As some of you may be able to imagine, the violence, the gender-based violence that she experiences inside of a women's facility is much like the gender-based violence she experienced in the men's facility. And because of her particular, because of who she is, like that violence has actually exacerbated. And so we still have to do a lot to support her these days. And in addition to supporting her, and by taking her lead with both our projects that concern people on the inside and our projects that concern trans folks on the outside, we do post-release support and we take referrals from inside. So Kanataka will let us know about a person that she has either heard of or she knows personally who is being released soon. And she tells us what they need because they tell her what they need. And then one of the things that we do is put a call out to the community, near and far. And we ask people to support the person who's being released with, like, I think we got someone like a bedroom set recently, but sometimes folks just want funds to be able to get back on their feet. And so we do the fundraising for that kind of post-release support. One of the things that we would like to do to expand this post-release support is actually be able to provide those folks who are getting out with better and more and extensive resources for therapy, but not just any kind, right? Some of the other things that we do, we impact we have impacted, North Carolina Department of Public Safety policy as it relates to transgender and gender variant people who are incarcerated. So that time that Kanataka was able to be transferred, North Carolina actually had to change the policy to make that happen, because before then, trans people who were incarcerated were not allowed to choose which kind of facility they wanted to be in. And we're still challenging the ways that the state is limiting that today for gender variant people. We also rapidly respond to violence against trans people in the community, and people who are not trans in the community. So this is probably true for the uniqueness and the beauty of those of us in North Carolina. But when it comes to social justice, whether it be environmental justice, repro justice, racial justice, economic justice, trans folks and queer folks in the state are on the front lines of those fights. And so one of the things that we are called to do, right, is to rapidly respond to violence and support people after the fact or sometimes during. One of the things that we do is we help connect trans folks in and around Charlotte to Black queer therapists in Charlotte. We are specifically working with the Social Justice Emotional Response Collective. That is a group led by Rhea Chapman, a wonderful organizer and therapist in the Charlotte area. They work with organizers and people who are defendants for free. And they provide support for folks. So we refer people to that program if they let us know that they want certain types of support that look like therapy or creating a safety plan with a mental health professional. Sometimes folks don't want a professional or someone that works in a professional setting to create a safety plan. So they will call someone that they know. And so oftentimes our organizers are involved with helping people navigate safety plans that look like having a dispute with someone who might be an intimate partner, might not be, but also helping people navigate being homeless and houseless and figuring out where they're going to sleep tonight. And then I also wanted to name that one of the other things we do as a collective is that we put pressure on the North Carolina Department of Public Safety and other specific institutions that we learn are doing trans people wrong, or at institutions where trans people are having really negative experiences. I don't look at the chat, I see something here. Thank you, I'll go slower. I wanted to provide some background for the work that we do and kind of how it came to be, but also this background is relevant for how it came to be that we were addressing houselessness with Black trans survivors this year. So these are some of the conditions and circumstances that have led to this iteration of our work. So I want for folks to think about House Bill 2, which, if you all recall, it's the bill that did a few things, but one of the things that it did is it made it such that trans folks could not use the bathroom that is associated with our gender identity. And we are supposed to use the bathroom that corresponds with the gender we were assigned at birth. So the post HB2 impacts are felt across gender and sexuality within the LGBTQ community in this state of North Carolina. And so even though House Bill 2 was something that went into law in 2016, I want to name that it's been a really hard 5 years since then. And trans folks in the state, namely Black, trans, and queer folks in the state, we are really feeling the brunt of that impact. The last 5 years in Charlotte specifically have been extremely violent for Black trans women and trans women of color. I want to name here that in the last 5 years, there has been increased violence against Black trans women in the Southeast region of the occupied United States. So we're dealing with it on a few different levels here. I also want to name that Charlotte, that this kind of violence is happening in a lot of different places in North Carolina. And in Charlotte, we are seeing an interesting kind of mixture of what I would call like New South politics, coupled with an increase in police violence and increased discrimination that trans folks who are Black are experiencing in the city. Black trans people and trans people of color experience housing and employment discrimination. So this is something that was true right before House Bill 2, before 2016. I want to name that it will likely be years before we know the impacts of COVID-19 on gender variant people in the South. And so one of the things that I am considering is how COVID is impacting other trans folks across the South who are houseless. And so we're trying to rely on strategies that are from outside of North Carolina as well. Even as trans folks are more likely to experience intimate partner violence compared to those who do not identify as trans, interventions on the nonprofit level and the clinical level continue to fail trans people of color. I gave a shout out to my therapist at the top of this because after hearing a lot of the conversations today and yesterday, I realized that the provider that I work with is very different from some of the providers that exist. Being a part of the sessions just really allowed me to sit with that gratefulness for the provider that I've been able to work with for the past 4 years. The next thing that I wanted to talk about is Black trans folks have always already been invested in developing ways to keep each other safe and to house each other outside of these state interventions. And so we're really clear that interventions on the nonprofit level, they fail us. The clinical level, they fail us. And so we've always been invested in making sure that we have what we need and that we keep each other safe outside of what the state may have to offer. And so we need systems and structures that are dedicated to funding anti-carceral approaches to intimate partner violence centered around trans people of color. Trans people of color lead specific lives, and we deserve care that is specific to our identities and that is specific to the kind of resources that we need. And so a lot of the things that are available to cisgender people, they just simply don't work or are not options for trans people in terms of accessibility. One of the folks on my team suggested that I make an effort to break the things down that I covered on the previous slide into a smaller kind of timeline. And so I want for y'all to go with me, kind of imagine with me, or go back in time with me rather, for this timeline. So on May of 2016, the Department of Justice declared that HB2 was discriminatory. The following month, we start to see the businesses, corporations like the NBA pull out of Charlotte to host their events. Charlotte took a really big hit financially when the NBA pulled out from the All-Star game. So if people were not paying attention to trans folks before, they were, because of the negative impact that HB2 was having on corporations and institutions in North Carolina. Later that year in August, Black trans folks, including myself, took back Charlotte Pride, even though Charlotte Pride officially denounced their relationship with Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department this year. Black trans folks in Charlotte have been advocating for the police to be out of Pride for a really long time, and castigated for doing so. Also later that year, we have Charlotte Uprising. I mentioned that queer and trans Black folks are the people that are on the front lines of lots of different movements. So similarly here, what we saw in Charlotte is the people who were addressing HB2 in a political education way, in a direct action way, in an advocacy way. Those folks are the people that were called, right, to turn up against the police in 2016. I also want to name that this is where or when the social justice emotional response collective kind of became a thing. So we realized during the uprising, which looked like kind of back-to-back protests and police aggression in Charlotte, and we had to pay specific attention to the queer and trans Black organizers, as those are the folks that were the most unsafe during that time. We realized that there was a need for things like childcare, but also that the activists and the organizers who were taking it to the streets, they needed support on the back end and on the front end. And so Rhea Chapman, before she started leading family and maternal wellness of Charlotte, she approached some of the organizers and said, like, what if I can get a bunch of therapists who could kind of be on call, and they can respond to the organizers who are in crisis or who need a little bit of support. And so I think a couple of years later, they officially named it the Social Justice Emotional Response Collective. And that collective is also who organizers entrusted to support people who are getting bailed out of jail, like through jail support efforts. And so we really appreciate the way that those providers moved up in the community during that time. So let's keep going, right? I mentioned Glow Merriweather on the timeline. Glow Merriweather is a really important Black trans organizer. And soon after the protests in 2016, they were indicted with, they were charged with inciting a riot. This really impacted the queer and trans folks in the community, because for us, it was kind of a culmination of the really things that we always already see in our community in terms of like trans misogyny with HB2, and then the targeting of Black, queer, and trans people. And so Glow's arrest and charge, it really signaled for us that we needed to somehow make connections for people in our community between House Bill 2 and what was happening like in time and space in 2016. A month after that, Relasia Taylor is attacked different to Glow, the attack of Relasia Taylor really shifted a lot of things for our organizing. So Relasia Taylor is a Black trans woman who was attacked in a park in Charlotte in 2016. She was brutalized. And after the incident happened, Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department criminalized Relasia for a sex crime. And so as trans organizers who are already concerned with trans liberation and the way that Black people are having negative interactions with the cops, especially in Charlotte, we knew that supporting Relasia Taylor was something that we needed to do in order to make that kind of theoretical, but also like material step for our community or connection for our community about the impacts of House Bill 2 and what happens when you don't take trans misogyny seriously. Let's go to 2017. So in the springtime of 2017, North Carolina says that they're going to repeal House Bill 2 with something called House Bill 142. I'm not going to go into detail about House Bill 142, but you should know that it is just as egregious as House Bill 2. And yeah, there's still a lot of problems with it. In May of 2017, a Black trans woman named Sherelle Faulkner passed away from injuries that she sustained after an attack. In 2017, Derica Banner is killed in Charlotte. And then April 2018, Jayla is attacked. And so I'm also kind of lifting up these events to kind of show the background of what some of the things that we were trying to address with the organizing that we do with House of Kanataka. So recognizing that trans and queer people are kind of being left out of our conversations around police violence and racial justice. And we need to show, or we need support for trans and queer people, things that look like access to free therapy, or for example, like showing someone how to create something like a safety plan. So this year, moving forward to this year, we were, again, trying to respond to violence in our community. In the winter of 2021, we were made aware of a violent attack against a houseless Black trans woman in Charlotte. And then in the spring of 2021, we had 3 trans women of color be killed in, 2 trans women of color be killed in Charlotte, kind of back to back. And Jasleen Castro actually was not killed, but she passed away due to a lack of access to healthcare. She passed away outside of Charlotte. And so I named these 3 women to kind of talk about, how we used what happened from 2018 and 2016 to speed up to the work this year. So Jada Peterson and Remy Fennell, they were murdered in Charlotte. And like I mentioned, Jasleen Castro, she died alone in a shelter in New York City days before she was supposed to return to Charlotte. So at this time, right, 2021, House of Kanataka is a thing. And the Black trans women that are in House of Kanataka, or that that the organizers are in community with, they are letting us know as community members that they need housing and that we need to kind of think critically about how to house them. So this is how we responded. One of the things that we did was provide funeral expenses for folks' families who couldn't afford it, as a way to support them through the time. And then we also kind of canvassed the community to ask trans women, Black trans women, about their experiences with housing. And so this allowed us to kind of open up a space of communication. Of course, when we asked about how we could support people, and as housing came up, lots of other things kind of came up too. So when Black trans folks have access to housing, they can prioritize other really, really, really important things. I imagine that some of the Black trans women that I work on a daily basis to house, I imagine that they would choose therapy, and they are not housed. And so they don't have the time or the space, right, to be able to prioritize talking with a provider, finding a provider, and then the other or then kind of attempting to go over the other high barriers that are in their way. Another way that we responded is by raising money to redistribute to families. We virtually canvassed trans women of color near and in Charlotte regarding housing and safety. We had to reframe the narrative, right, about how police can protect trans people of color. So in the spring and in the winter, we weren't the only folks that wanted to respond to what was happening in our community. The police said that they wanted to respond too, but our group and groups like ours had to be that kind of reminding voice that let people know that the police don't keep us safe, that we keep us safe, and that the acknowledging and taking serious what Black trans women have to say about how the police are the purveyors of violence in our communities. We needed to reframe the narrative and to kind of re-prop up the community as a thing that could even be relied on. So we gathered and dragged state and local LGBTQ organizations demanding that they divert funds to housing for Black trans women. And we also encouraged orgs to start rapid response funds for Black trans folks facing violence and folks who are in need of housing. We additionally asked them to put money away for funds for when trans people of color die. One of the things that we've realized that the families of these trans folks of color don't have money to pay for the funeral expenses. And so one of the things that we'd like to see kind of on that nonprofit level is folks diverting and retaining funds to give directly to Black trans people like we do. We also intervened to support Black trans women navigating hotel housing by advocating that they not be displaced during the pandemic. So there are some entities that try to work on housing. The Queer Youth Center that houses folks caps it at an age that's lower than a lot of the trans women are. So they are not able to access that kind of housing support. And sometimes the calls that we get look like, can you intervene on me getting kicked out at my hotel? Can you intervene on a situation that I'm having at my hotel with my boyfriend or with my friends that will prevent me or us from getting displaced? And then there was a program in Charlotte ran by a Black trans woman, and she has a zero tolerance policy. And so what we found is that Black trans women who were looking for housing support from that program, a lot of them were kind of dispelled from the program for matters of violence that were out of their control. We believe that what sets our work apart is that we have low barriers to accessing funds and to building community. During the month of April, we were able to redistribute around $15,000 to 20 trans women in and around Charlotte. And this was in part because we dragged and gathered those 501c3 organizations. We encourage folks to give directly to the girls because we run out of money all the time to give to them. And collectively, our organizers spend around 40 hours a week fundraising on behalf of Black trans women to have a place to stay. So in our work, one of the things that we've kind of paused to think about and assess, like both for the organizers who do this work and for the people that our programs touch, we've kind of taken stock of what we need. So one of the things that there's a gap in is our death doulas, or people who can support folks who are looking for that work. providers and practitioners who will not call the cops on us, or people in our communities, people in our families. We need providers that are willing to work with people at sliding scale rates or for free. Black trans folks want virtual support these days, especially. We want self-care plans and safety plans that resemble our dreams of a world without police. And then this is probably the biggest thing, but we need low barriers to accessing care. We also pause to consider some of the gaps in addressing transgender intimate partner violence. So these statistics come from the Community Action Toolkit that the National Coalition of Anti-Violence Programs put out, or published, excuse me. So they define intimate partner violence, but not what constitutes an intimate partner. Here, I'm specifically thinking about the ways that Black, queer, and trans kinships, how some of the language for intimate partner violence and even domestic violence, it doesn't really mesh well or even map onto the kinds of relationships that Black trans people have with one another. So we're participating in this conference because of what they call IPV invisibility, right? Like the intimate partner violence that a lot of transgender people face is invisible, sometimes to us, but definitely to cis heteronormativity. Trans people of color are often not allowed in shelters, or shelters make it more possible for people to be criminalized or discriminated against. The violence goes unreported that queer and trans people face. More than 61% of LGBTQ survivors were turned away from domestic violence shelters in 2012, and nearly one over three were wrongly arrested as the abusive partner. This is one of our kind of fears around calling the police. Support services aren't accessible, or they simply do not exist. There have been many custody cases lately involving transgender people. The risk of losing custody of a child might influence a survivor from coming forward about abusive behavior. The isolation that accompanies intimate partner violence can be compounded by being transgender or in a relationship with a transgender partner in a transphobic society. I'm sorry. Silence about intimate partner violence within transgender communities further isolates survivors, giving more power to the person that did the harm. So I have been kind of gnawing on those statistics with the people that I'm in community with at House of Kanataka, and some of my friends who use therapy as a resource, or people who are involved in different types of peer support groups for trans folks. And we have been talking about the way that even the language or the words domestic violence and intimate partner violence, something about it feels like too clinical and just kind of off base around how we want to articulate our experiences. More kind of directly, one of the things that I have been asking myself is what Kanataka experiences inside of Anson Correctional Institution, does she experience domestic violence there, like given the definitions? Does she experience intimate partner violence, like given those definitions? And yeah, what does it mean to be like incarcerated and kind of navigating a domestic violence situation? And yeah, what does it mean to have an intimate partner inside? When I think about intentionally navigating a space of incarceration with another person, it sounds really fucking intimate to me. And to do that, to choose to do that with another person, it sounds like a partnership to me. And like, yeah, I understand that the language of intimate partner violence doesn't necessarily map onto what's happening inside cages. I found this really amazing tool, this power and control wheel. And I also am thinking about how this tool might map onto an ecosystem of domination and control that is the prison. And so I'm thinking about the ways that people who are incarcerated are completely like left out of this conversation. And so a rhetorical, but also not rhetorical question that I have is like, when the ecosystem relies on domination and control, what constitutes intimate partnerships? And right, don't Black queer kinships and Black queer familial relations, don't those things problematize the language of intimate partner violence and domestic violence? Maybe, maybe not. Something I want folks to think about. The last thing that I wanted to do before we go to questions and comments is actually share that and how you can give to Black trans women in our community directly. These three ladies need our support. I put their cash tags or the way that you can transfer money to these folks directly to them right under their picture. These are pictures of Jayla, of Little Tay, and of OG Tay. So Jayla is one of the girls that organizes with us. And then these other two women on the slide, they don't organize with us, but we organize on behalf of them to make sure that they have a place to stay. So I'll give folks one more kind of pause on this slide. I have another slide like this. These are two more women. This is Paris and Relasia Taylor. These women need support for housing as well. And I wanted to bring them into this virtual space with me in this way. I have a video that I want to share, and I'm trying to figure out how to get out of my presentation. Can y'all still see my screen?
No, it's gone now.
Great. Oh, is all my stuff gone too? Okay. Where is a quick place I can find the link? Sorry, I had all of my tabs open and now they're not. So I wanted us to take a second and watch this video of Dean Spade, Tourmaline, and Cece McDonald. Cece is kind of talking about her experiences and why we don't trust the police to keep us safe. Cece McDonald is a survivor and a Black trans organizer.
We can't see the video Ash
Okay.
right now.
Thank you for letting me know.
I think you have to share.
I'm not familiar with how to share a video if you're already sharing.
Is it in your browser? Oh, there you go.
Yes. Okay.
We live in a culture that's really like the cops will keep you safe, and then we see in cases like yours and all the ones we deal with that oftentimes those systems, court systems, police, prisons are actually the danger for our community. And one of the things I think I'm curious from you about is like, what do you think actually could make us all safer, or does make us safe when we're safe? Like, obviously love is one big one for you, and I'm just curious, like, you know, what would you like to see us all have to be safer or to prevent the kinds of harm that are so common?
And that's funny that you said that, because a lot of people don't know a lot of the details that happened before the incident. Me and my friends, we were actually stopped by the police before the incident had even happened. And I knew it was racial profiling, but he said it was because of a noise ordinance. But you just drove past a bar that was clearly loud. So even after I had got arrested, the people, well, not some of the people who were involved or knew the people who were involved, had actually came up to one of our safe spaces and were throwing glass bottles at my friends and family. And I was really nervous for them because I was locked up. But I knew that if anything had happened to them, you know, I would feel like that was my fault. And so after that had happened, I was told that the police had drove past and they had asked them to help them, and the police said no to them. And it was like, these are the people that we are coming out of our pockets for to protect us, but they choose who they want to protect. They choose who they want to serve. And it's not us. So I feel like we as a community need to we have to kind of like put our pride to the side. Because a lot of times, and like I was saying, like everybody feel like they have like this type of privilege over the person they feel is below them. And I feel like everybody feel like trans is at the bottom. And then like, I feel like gay people feel like they have a privilege over trans people. And I feel like straight people feel like they have a privilege over, you know, everybody feel like they have a privilege over someone. And so like, once we kind of let go of that and stop making our bodies and, you know, our transitions competition and like who has the you know, surgeries and this and that, and like focus on the things in our communities that's actually detrimental to you know, our schools and to our homes and to, you know, our communities in general, because prisons don't help, the cops don't help. None of this is actually helping our communities. It's making them worse. And so once we can figure out how to utilize our resources and our tools to, you know, build up each other and build up our communities, then that would be the thing that will keep us safe. We keep each other safe, you know what I'm saying? But we can't because we, you know, the system wants to divide and conquer. So they find a way to do that. Once people start caring, even if it doesn't involve them, then they will learn to have that empathy and sympathy for others. And then we can learn to protect each other because we will know what that type of pain would feel like. We're all equal in this. You know what I'm saying? It's us against them. It's not us, them, and the big man. No, it's they don't care about all our little subgroups. They just see us as money bags and statistics. That's all they care. You know what I'm saying? Like they don't care about if we bigger about who got the best gym shoes or who had the best boob job. Like that's not what they care about. Because once y'all start fighting, they're gonna throw both y'all asses in jail and they're gonna get all the money off of y'all. You know what I'm saying? They don't care about none of that. That's what we need to learn, how to just like let go of those little material petty things and focus on the things that's bigger in our community.
I really appreciate those words by Cece. I wanted to name that some of the places that I felt like, how do I stop doing that? I wanted to name some of the places that where I felt like the work that we do was reflected in some of the other presentations. Yesterday, there was a conversation about abolitionism in prevention work. And something that really stuck with me is that the presenters talked about that they don't do the work alone, or that when they respond to violence, it doesn't happen in a solitary way, and that folks are kind of doing it collectively and doing it in community and on a team with other folks. Someone named another group that supports activists and organizers pro bono. I thought that was a really amazing idea. I really appreciated the kind of differences in naming the differences between transformative justice and restorative justice. What we are kind of advocating for as trans folks are those more transformative and creative interventions, and less of the restorative things, because those things are still very state derived a lot of the time. And I also want to name that, we didn't start out like doing de-escalation work or doing conflict resolution work. Like we were the people that were committed to responding in a community way and not using the cops. And so we had to build on those skills if we were going to keep showing up. And so the work that we've done over the years has been a reflection of that, that building. And we wouldn't be able to do it without each other. So I do want to put the hashtags for the Black trans women back up here. So I'm gonna get back to my presentation for that.
I can type them into the chat too.
That would be great.
There. Also, Ash, there's a question that came up about how people might connect and help without giving money if people are struggling with funds.
I'm sorry, without giving money?
Is there ways that people can help and connect without money if they don't have those resources?
Absolutely. I would say to consider kind of getting on board with the work that House of Connecticut does. So we are made up of lots of different types of people. Not all of us consider ourselves to be community organizers. I think at least 2 people in our group are like licensed clinical, either social workers and or therapists. But what I'm trying to say is that we need a wide range of skills and practitioners. And so I invite people to like maybe learn a little bit more about the work that we do and come to one of our meetings. We have kind of ongoing stuff happening to support the girls that are kind of being touched by our programming with money, but with other resources too. So it's always great to have folks with a wide variety of skills being a part of that team. I think, if I can, we have, or something new that we would like to do are these working groups. One of them is like research on places of incarceration inside North Carolina so that we can have more information about what folks who are LGBTQ, what their experiences might be. One of the other things that we do is like write to folks who are inside, or we encourage other people to write to folks inside. And then the casework that we do, involves a lot. So we are excited to bring new people in to do that with us.
So are you open to having some questions come?
Absolutely.
Folks can type in the chat. If you want to speak, you can raise your hand and I will allow you, I'll give you mic privileges. You can also do it in the Q&A if you like. These are 3 places. If you don't want to speak, I can read it aloud. I might jump in with just one question because I really appreciated the talk and also the overview of all of the work that you and the House of Connecticut are doing. And one of the things that you really highlighted was, the way that state violence connects with intimate, maybe we put the word intimate partner violence kind of in quotation marks. So just interpersonal violence, right? Or like violence within the relationships in our networks and communities. So I wanted to know, if you want to reflect a little bit more on how you see that kind of transformative approach doing a kind of dual pronged work to stop both kinds of violence, right? The state violence and the violence that we do, when the way we harm each other, like the people that we actually care about or the people that we just come into contact with. I know that's sort of the general gist of your talk, but I just wanted to hear a little bit more if you had anything to say.
I feel like, or one of the things that feels central to that is the part about doing it like alongside other people who have different skills, or lots of different skills. When I kind of pause and think about the things that we're able to do or the situations that we've been able to intervene on, usually a lot of like decisions haven't been made ahead of time. And so I'm trying to say something about like what is the word when you, the trust that we're able to build, the vulnerability that we have with one another, really helps us build community. And right, like the people that I organize with at House of Kanataka, if I were to be in a situation, right, like these are the people that I would be reaching out to because I know what they're about, because I know they're not going to call the cops on me. Yeah. Does that speak to what you were asking about, Scott?
Oh yeah, totally. Thanks. And
Okay.
I just saw another question pop up in the Q&A. Stacy was saying, first, the work of you and the House of Kanataka is amazing. Would you say more about how you all went about addressing policy level change, such as policy changes within DPS? Did DPS respond? And what were the outcomes? And then thank you for all you're doing.
Yeah, thanks for that question. So back in 2019, when Kanataka was at the men's facility, because of our work and because of her advocating for herself, right, before we even met her, we were able to get her transferred to a women's facility. So that transfer happened because North Carolina DPS changed the policy to reflect that a trans person can choose. So we believe that this will have a positive impact for other people who are trans and inside a place of incarceration that doesn't match their gender identity. One of the things that we know is that there are folks falling through the cracks. When we were helping to get Kanataka transferred, we learned about, I think it was 7 other people that may be trans that were at that same facility. And then because of the work that we do, oftentimes we'll get some information from someone in the community or someone who interfaces with trans people who are incarcerated, like maybe through their work at Equality NC or the ACLU, and they'll let us know that they have a trans person that is like dealing with something inside. And so once we have that information and we are able to talk to the person and ask them about how they want us to move on the outside, we move forward. And so we're able to do that work by taking serious the concerns of people inside and taking that direction, right? So I'm on the phone with Kanataka, and other organizers are on the phone with Kanataka every week, kind of, listening to how she thinks we can address houselessness in Charlotte and interpersonal violence with the girls. And so we're taking a lot of our direction from people that are inside and letting them tell us how to do it and what to do. And another thing I think I want to name is that, even though that policy has changed, there are still people that are not in the right institution. And I would go so far as to say that all of the institutions are wrong, especially as trans people are there. And that we don't want to stop with the policy change, or the policy change isn't what we are mostly focused on. The thing that we care about the most would be to let trans folks know that we're there for them, that people on the outside are kind of ready and willing to act on their behalf. I think that right now is a particularly kind of interesting time to get involved with this work, as things are shifting with Kanataka's situation in particular, with her dealing with discrimination, even at this women's facility that she's at. She is still, dealing with a lack of access to quality care. One of the things that we were trying to do is actually get her moved to the North Carolina Correctional Institution for Women. She'd like to be transferred there, and the state continues to deny that transfer. But one of the reasons why she wants to go there is because her providers are in the Triangle area, and where she's at Anson CI, she doesn't always have access to them. And so she talks about, the failures of like the mental health staff kind of talking to her about her trans identity. And she talks to us about how she refuses certain people's care, and she kind of acts as an example, or an example of how to demand the care that you deserve, and how to, demand that people give it to you, but especially people who are providers.
A question came up in the chat. Buffy was asking, can you address the difference between homeless and houseless, please, just so I understand?
Yeah, so home, or one of the things that people say who think that it's important to make that distinction, is that home is wherever you make it, especially for for Black trans people. Like, you can have home wherever you are, or home is where your community is. And like what a lot of these women, a lot of what these trans folks in our community lack is a house, like a place to live that they know that they can always return to. Here, I also want to name that one of the things that we learned as folks who care about like housing Black trans people and making sure that they have access to other things they need, is that, everyone does not want to live in a house. Or my idea of permanent housing, like, isn't the idea that a lot of the girls have, for like what would constitute permanent housing for them, right? Some of them are engaged in survival sex work, and that is significant because like where they work is where they live. And they wouldn't want to do anything that would keep them from being able to work in the ways that are important to them. And so I would say this work has caused the people who are engaged in it to pause and to really center those who are most directly impacted.
Also, before we forget, if you wanted to go back to that slide with the info so people can send funds to people,
Yes.
we're going to try and put that in. And then when you're ready, there's another question in the Q&A. So just let me know.
I'm ready.
So MPCC interviews is saying, Ash, thank you for all you've shared and your intentionality in humanizing this work, bringing faces and personal lived experiences to today's talk. My question is, how do you remain motivated in your work?
I think I remain motivated in this work because I talk to Kanatika so often. And when I think about her being in a cage and the tenacity that she has to like keep going to make sure that I'm like doing what I'm supposed to do on the outside. She's also like doing a lot of advocating for other queer and trans people inside, like Kanatika and the other people who are in cages that I know, they motivate me. And they remind me about the ways in which I want to say like we're all confined and we're both confined, and how to subvert those things and break them down and break the barriers down.
In the chat, they respond in powerful points. Thank you.
I appreciate y'all. Thank you.
And we got the Venmos and Cash Apps up in the chat for folks if they want to copy those down, spread information about how to get these people funds.
Follow House of Kanatika on Instagram if you'd like to keep up with our work. We're going to have an upcoming meeting on Tuesday. It would be a great time to plug in.
Oh, Ash, we're missing Lil Tay's info.
Little Tay. Okay, let me see if I can go back here. Little Tay right here.
Is it the I'm Tay for YY or Tay?
Yes, sorry. Little Tay is in the middle here. I am Tay for YY.
Well, we still have a few more minutes for questions and comments or responses. again, I'm really grateful that you came and brought this into this space, because, you know, it's, I think, you know, as you talked about, sort of things that get invisibilized when we talk about violence, when we talk about, you know, relationship violence or intimate violence. I mean, there's like, you're drawing these connections between the ways that particular people bear the brunt of the most intense violence that is also like not addressed by the state or many institutions, because it is not even looked at, right? Oh, we got another question here in the Q&A from C. McCall H. What are some dreams you have for House of Kanataka or your community in the next few years? That's a good one.
One of the dreams that I have is that me and my friends can have access to like the mental health resources that we need and deserve to keep doing this work. One of the dreams that I have is that there are people in this space that are going to reach out to House of Kanataka to let us know that they work alongside other people that could help contribute to the work that we're doing for trans people across the state. Yeah, and another dream that I have is for police and prisons to be abolished in my lifetime.
Yes. Do you all like link up with other you know, people doing similar kind of work in outside of North Carolina in any ways?
Yeah, we are actually, I was really looking forward to hearing Kayla Gore yesterday because we would love to be able to replicate something like what she has going on in Memphis for trans people in North Carolina or in parts of North Carolina. We know it probably won't look like exactly what they've got going down there with their tiny house project, but yeah, we are looking at My Sister's House. There's another organization. It is a I don't remember the name of them, but they're a fund, and they kind of work like how we work, except they're a nonprofit, and they redistribute money to Black trans women for housing. Dr. Holland and one of our colleagues, Tiz, they're also a part of House of Kanataka, but they do this work with us. And I mentioned, or there's another organization called Transcend Charlotte. They are also folks who are helping to like connect folks who are trans to free mental health resources in Charlotte and other types of like medical case working. And so it's great to have those on the team. Oh yeah, see, Michael named House of Tulip down in New Orleans. Another like trans radical housing project that we would love to like be able to model our work after, especially if and as we get more funds in.
I got a question coming up here. MPCC interviews said, I had attempted earlier in the pandemic to get connected with the organization that provides mental health services for organizers, but hadn't heard anything back. Do you have contact information for a specific person aligned with that organization, assuming that they're still growing their network of providers?
I am thinking of Rhea Chapman, who is the organizer, and she's one of the folks in charge at Family and Maternal Wellness. And Family and Maternal Wellness is, I understand, like the kind of host organization that bottom lines the Social Justice Emotional Response Collective in Charlotte. But I think that group is made up of therapists from different places to provide folks with that support. And I think that on their website, because I've sent providers there, I think on their website, they have a place where you can say, I am an amazing provider and I want to help y'all. They will kind of follow up.
I was also thinking, like, in relation to what Ignacio was talking about this morning in the keynote, one of the things that's really inspiring about House of Canotica's approach is that it's intervening on the like reaction level of like trying to help people who have been harmed, but also with a like preventative kind of aspect. And I don't know if that's something that y'all think about, talk about explicitly, but I was just really inspired by that, at least. Yeah, if you have any other thoughts on that.
Yeah, up until, or as I was preparing for this specific presentation, I have been considering how, or if our work like is prevention or could, work in alignment with explicit DV work and explicit IPV work. And I think there's some connections there. Something else I wanted to name. Sorry, it just left me. I forgot what I was going to say.
And that was happening to me too. Any like final thoughts or questions that people would like to share as we're coming towards the end of the time? And I don't want to keep asking questions myself. Well, I want to thank you again for the presentation of the work that you do, and also the invitation to people to, involve themselves in the various ways that they can. Yeah, thank you so much for your time and knowledge and resources. Really appreciate it.